Ow!
Greetings YouTube, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon, and welcome to another book review. Today we are going to be reviewing the book Altered Carbon by Richard K. Morgan. Now, what I really like in science fiction, one of my favorite subgenres of the genre is cyberpunk. For those of you who don't know, cyberpunk is a sort of a subgenre of science fiction that got started around the early 80s, almost mid 80s. One of the very first true cyberpunk novels was a story called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" I think that was it a novel? Yeah, I believe it was a novel. Yeah, by Philip K. Dick. He's the same that story was actually translated into the movie Blade Runner. For those of you who don't know. Cyberpunk usually involves near future, not all of it though. Often dystopian societies. That sort of has a grungy, heavily stylized feel to it. Oftentimes blurring the lines. The stories involve blurring the lines between human and machine. Oftentimes by being able to maybe hack into computers with just connecting your mind to a computer, often subcultures and often gang activity. Usually it's usually sort of the future world viewed through less than ideal glasses. In the early 80s, a lot of cyberpunk stories had to do with large mega corporations that ruled the world. That was a sort of staple of cyberpunk. Cyberpunk had gone through kind of a slump in recent decades, but I think it's sort of making a comeback in recent years. And, oh, by the way, one of the most well-known cyberpunk novels, of course, is Neuromancer. I think people would lynch me if I hadn't mentioned that, by uh, by William Gibson. I'll probably do a review of that particular book at some other time, but it's a classic, so most people know about it. I try to focus on books that some people might not have heard of. So, as I was saying, my focus today is Altered Carbon by Richard Morgan. It's actually a first book in, well, thus far, a trilogy, though he hasn't made any more since then. The first book, Altered Carbon, the second, Broken Angels, and the third, Woken Furies. Now, these are part of the Takeshi Kovacs series. And now, just so you know, his name looks like it's spelled Kovacs, but it's actually an Eastern European pronunciation of the word, and it's pronounced Kovac. It's actually sort of a thing in the books where people don't pronounce his name right. Now, this takes place in the 24th or 25th century. It kind of escapes me. But humankind has basically developed a technology to travel to other planets, but they don't have light speed capability. All these ships would take, even at top speed, would take generations to get there, or, at least decades. And what they've learned, a lot of the technology they've learned from a previous alien civilization they first found on Mars. So they simply call them Martians, even though they were not originally from Mars. Just the remnants of their civilization. They found dead bodies in countless cities on these other planets that they've discovered by decoding Martian technology. And in this future, when they're born, they receive what is called a cortical stack, which records everything that you are from birth. And so if you die, and if you have the money, the means, all they are able to do is just put your cortical stack in another body, and you just go on from there. So, to quote Red Dwarf, death isn't the physical handicap it used to be. More or less. There are people who can't afford it, or people who, through reasons of conscience, choose not to have themselves downloaded into other bodies. But you do have some people, an elite few, who are basically called Meths, based off of Methuselah, who's supposedly in Scripture the oldest person who ever lived. And these people have the means and the money to constantly update themselves and download themselves into other bodies when that body wears out. So these people are centuries old. Whereas Takeshi Kovacs from his because he's spent time in what's called neocast and also in cryogenic sleep. He's only in his 40s, but he's really over 150 years old. Where you have other Mets that are like 300, 400 years old. Well, Altered Carbon is, like I said, takes place in this future, and it starts off on a planet called Harlan's World, which is actually Takeshi Kovacs' home world, and it moves very quickly from that world to Earth because he's killed in a standoff with some cops. He and his girlfriend, and he wakes up on Earth having been chosen by a meth named Bancroft to solve a case where he supposedly killed himself, though he had no reason to do it, and he was always backing himself up. So, what would be the use of killing himself? And so, through a very twisted plot, Kovacs finds out the reasons behind his death, involving a lot of the political situations that are going on Earth at the moment. And through it all, through a lot of introspection, you learn about the situation of life with the UN Protectorate, which is the government that rules over Earth and all its colonies, and the bad things about it and the good things about it, and also a lot of what Takeshi's life is all about. Takeshi himself is, well, formerly a member of what is called the Envoy Corps, which are specially trained soldiers that are given extra type of training to be able to endure being put into a whole bunch of different bodies, certain techniques in order to survive, going crazy in simulated torture, all kinds of different things. He has a huge skill set. So it's really cool to see him in action, especially with certain types of bionic enhancements that are in his body, particularly what's called neurochem, which is something that kind of enhances his nervous system to give him the ability to perform great feats of strength and speed and other sense activities. Now, this is a very, very twisted plot, and it plays out in this particular book like a hard-boiled detective novel almost. So it almost feels like it has a cyberpunk feel mixed with sort of a film noir type feel. So it's something that if you like a good mystery novel and also have a thing for sci-fi, or at least just don't mind the sci-fi twist in your detective novels, I think that a lot of people will really get a kick out of this because it has some pretty cool technology, which is actually kind of a reflection of how technology may well progress one day. This is a humanity that has kind of hit the singularity, so to speak. For those of you who don't know what the singularity is, it's basically a perceived point where we would be able to build machines that would be so smart that they would be the ones doing all the thinking. Now, there are AIs in this story, but they're kept under strict control. So, and also we have, like I said, a point where you can't really tell where the human ends and the machine begins because we can now digitize our own minds. And by the way, the only way to travel faster than light in this world is actually through what's called a needlecast, where you basically download your mind across the galaxy, well, across the cosmos to another one of the colony worlds, and just get re-sleeved, which is put into a new body. They call your body your sleeve. So people have a tendency to change their own looks. For some people, it's a very traumatic experience, whereas others can get used to it. Especially Kovacs, because he has a lot of special training. So this deals with a lot of technology and its possible evolutions, as well as weaving a really interesting tale of a murder and the circumstances surrounding it, and also certain circumstances involving the technologies that exist in this future world. A really good read, if you ask me. Really, a friend of mine kind of recommended this to me because I was starting up reading this tabletop RPG called Eclipse Phase. When I explained some of it to him, he's like, "Oh, that's Altered Carbon." And he kept on asking me to read it, so I finally wrote it down and went to go check it out, and I ended up really liking the book. Even though I had to read it twice to completely understand everything that was going on. The plot is very intricate. And Kovacs is a very complicated person, especially with some of the stuff that he gets into in this story. It's complex, but he's the kind of person that he shows time and time again you do not want to cross him. So, once again, I highly recommend this book. Scale of 1 to 10, this one I probably would give a solid 8, simply because the downside of the book is it tends to get a little confusing, the plot, because you do kind of get lost in Kovacs' introspection, which happens a lot, and so it will kind of divert you a little bit from the story, so you have to pay very close attention to what's going on. But weaves a great tale in a very fantastic world, which would seem utterly alien to us, actually. So, once again, I highly recommend it. And like I said, it's a cyberpunk story. If you really like cyberpunk, if you really like detective novels, really like sci-fi, check it out. It's Altered Carbon by Richard Morgan, everyone. I'd like to know what you think if you've read the book, or if you're looking for something interesting, or if you're planning on reading it. Let me know down below in the comment section. As always, keep it civil. And so that's it for my book review today. Thank you very much for listening. And so this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. And as always, everyone, stay lucky and stay blessed. Take care.